How we doing? I figured I'd make a video on how to build an off-grid cabin along with all the stuff and all the things that go along with it, because it's not just build an off-grid cabin. We could always start off with the very first part is the want. Like, why do I want an off-grid cabin? Like, do I really think that I can do it? Is it something that is feasible in the United States of America at this point? Is it something that I think I could do by myself or with the help of, a small group of friends or family to really actually start to build this thing? And what's the steps that you have to take? Because honestly, it's it's a big undertaking. So the thing is, you have to really be dedicated and really, really just say, hey, listen, I'm willing to do this right now. I'm going to get very, very uncomfortable, and I'm going to spend some money. So whatever anyone says, you're going to spend money. It's not the easiest process in the world. It's not the hardest process in the world. It's kind of what you make it. So we're going to start from the very beginning, and I'll probably skip through because being a storyteller is not the easiest thing in the world. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to give the best and brief description so I don't bore everyone to death and this isn't 3 hours long, because honestly, it could become a very, very long-winded thing going on with building a cabin. But the very first thing I would say to anyone that wants to do this is say, hey, where would be feasible from where I live to where my family is to what I want as a place where I can go while being off-grid. For example, I did not want to be on a main road, so I kind of knew I wanted to be on a dirt road. So with that being said, that eliminates 97% of the properties that I was looking at online. And that's where the search starts, online. So the thing is, now one of the other parameters is, listen, I want to be close to a water source, a lake, a river, somewhere where I could get water. There was a couple other things I'll go along in the video, but those were, probably a couple of the most important. Obviously, distance. I didn't want to be more than two hours away from where I lived, because it's a property I wanted to be able to get to in case of an emergency, and or, I wanted to kind of hang out. How big did I want to make this thing? That was another problem that we'll get into at in other parts of the video, because the towns and the states and the federal government, they have a hand in everything you do. What else is there? There's there are serious hoops you got to jump through. But with that being said, this particular property took me about 2 years to find. And, it took some weekends just going out and just looking around and seeing what was going on, trying to figure out, like, where would be feasible, which state. Now, I live in New Jersey, so I'm pretty close to Pennsylvania and New York, which are both, have a lot of land to offer in relation to time to get there. Now, Pennsylvania was very, very expensive for land, but it has great laws. It's a little bit more friendly for what I wanted to do. But at the time, I just didn't have that much upfront money when it came to Pennsylvania and the distance from New Jersey. So then I started to look in New York, and that was kind of where I said, hey, listen, I know the laws aren't really built for me and what I want to do, but the land is cheap, so I'll figure out a workaround. Because I'm going to be honest with you, with this build or with anything you do in life, there's always a workaround. There's always something that you say, hey, I could work around this and make it work. Is it going to be perfect? No, not everything is perfect, but you could work around to make it work. And a lot of times in this off-grid situation or a situation that I was in, you had to do that. You had to think outside the box. You had to spend some money to get around the box, because the box is built for a reason. And that's the box they want to keep you in. Part of building a cabin is, I'll get into it later on, is the box that they keep you in is very hard to get out of. But if you really, really try, and again, you use workaround, then sometimes you just got to be a bully, you'll get around it. So with that being said, what else parameters as far as what you want to do and where you want to go? It became pretty apparent that I was going to pick New York over Pennsylvania just because I knew the price for acreage was just too much. I like the laws of Pennsylvania, but it was just too much at the time. And you have to remember, I have a family at the time. I have responsibilities. It isn't just I'm not to throw my whole life savings at anything because I know the undertaking I was about to go. I built a couple of houses before this, so for me, I understood. So it came down to this one day. I just kind of grabbed my girlfriend, of which after 14 years I'm still with her. And I said, hey, I think there's 2 properties I want to go look at in upstate New York. And I'm pretty happy with this guy. I found him on online, but not like on your regular online things like, realtor.com. He was just a private guy who went out to tax sales and bought property, of which you could do too. Tax sales are very, very relevant in all of the country when it comes to property, because people with property just they tend to just kind of let go of the property. So this is what this guy did. I found him online because, like I said, there was a workaround. The workaround was, listen, I had to go out and work and look for something or someone that knew exactly what I wanted and maybe had what I wanted or could look for me, because realtors online, they're amongst the laziest people on planet Earth. Let's just be honest. They just want a paycheck and they want to do as little as possible. But let's not even get into that because I'm trying not to bring it anything else. But with that being said, this video's it's going to become a little bit more long-winded. My whole goal is to help people. Because honestly, I always tell the younger people, no one ever helped me with anything. It was just trial and error. So if I could just help a little bit, I'll do it. Because honestly, I want everyone to be able to do what I did, because I undertook something that it should be done. It's part of our freedom and our rights and what we want to do. So I grabbed my girlfriend. We jump in the truck, and honestly, I'm not a hunter. I have a friend who's a hunter. It was deer season up there, but I said, listen, this is something I want. I want to go. I want to make sure. When I talked to the guy, his name was Bruce. I said, hey, listen, Bruce, I'm not really familiar with. He said, listen, that's my property, and you could go on my property. Don't worry about it. Okay, so we drove up there, and as we were driving up there, if you can imagine where Woodstock was, I'm pretty close to that, but you get into the backwoods over there, it gets a little like, I'm a city guy. I'm a suburbia guy. You're starting to drive on a right of way, and you're like, is someone going to shoot me up here? With that being said, no one shot us, but me and my girlfriend, we looked at 2 properties, and there was one property that was backed up by a river, and it was on the same right of way. So it was very flat and very nice. I really like that property. But then we get to the next property, which is 5 acres, but it was 2 sides of the right of way. So it was 2.5 on one side and 2 on the other side, like 4.5, 5, somewhere in there. With that being said, it had a lot of terrain, a lot of topography, and huge boulders. I'm talking boulders big as trucks. I mean, I've never seen anything like this. So with that being said, I said, okay, we took a look, both of them. We called Bruce, and I said, hey, Bruce, listen, I'm going to take a couple minutes, and we're going to kind of figure this out. And I asked my girlfriend on the way home, I said, hey, listen, which one did you like the best? Like, there's one or the other, and this is kind of, everything met my parameters as far as being off a main road. So it was off the main road. It was kind of like this back woodsy area with a right of way. So that was it. There was a lake, a big lake by, not right on the property, but the lake is, within walking distance. And there was some other things. It was just, it was kind of, for me, a city guy, it was God's country. I mean, 4.5 acres. So I asked my girlfriend, I'm like, well, which one did you like? She's like, listen, I like the first one that was flat and easy, and it just seemed like it was perfect. She's like, I got to be honest, I like the other one that had a lot of rocks. And what she did was she called it nature's artwork. And my head went in my hands. So I was like, oh boy. With that being said, I called Bruce and I was like, all right, Bruce, listen, we're going to take that one that's on top of the hill over there, the one that's, on the top of the mountain, the not flat one. He laughed. And he said, okay. So we started the procedure. And my girlfriend really didn't think I was serious. Like, she's just like, and I said, listen, we're gonna buy this. We're gonna put it in your name. We're gonna do what we got to do, and there's some other things that go along with it. But basically, the guy Bruce came to my house. We signed a deal, and next thing I know, I had a piece of property. And this is where the real adventure started. I mean, real adventure. There was no, this is gonna be fun. Like, I started to realize, like, wow, this is this is a serious undertaking, because now you start to talk about the township. So we're going to go to part 2, starting to understand what your rights are and what you're allowed to do and what the township is willing to put you through as far as, hey, what you can and can't build, and what type of property you need to build a complete off-grid cabin. Because I will tell you, just so you know, if you go above 40 acres in most states, you don't have to worry about the township. You just kind of do what you want to do. But anything under that, you start worrying about. You have to follow the federal code, state code, and the town code that you're in. All right, we're going to go to part 2 right now. All right, so we're going to get into part 2 of I found the property. It's what we were looking for. It's great. All the things that I wanted. Lake, off the beaten path on a dirt road. No one's really near you. It's just the perfect place. So now we get into, we paid for it. We have the land. The guy was great. He did what he had to do to hook us up. But then I start to realize, like, okay, this is getting real, but in the same sense, this is what you wanted, so let's go find a travel trailer to park on the property, and that would be step 1. So this way, I know when I do start building, I could literally just go there and have a place to rest my head while I'm building on the weekends or whatever, and that is exactly where my problems began. There's a lot of stories within this story, but I'm going to keep this one brief. I bought a 34-foot trailer and had no business buying one that big. Logistically, I'm in New Jersey. The property's in upstate New York. Yes, it was a good trailer for what I needed it for, but getting it up there, I mean, it was like 13,000 pounds. So getting it up there was it was a nightmare. With that being said, I'll leave that story alone a little bit, but I will tell you, we did finally get it up there. Horror show, but we finally got it up there. It was the middle of the winter. Very bad conditions. We get it up there. And that day that we got it up there is when I found out about the locals and how much the locals do not like people like me. I forgot to get Daddy's permission, meaning the township did not like the fact that I parked a travel trailer on my property without telling them, I guess, or, whatever it may be, like what my intentions were. This is where you start to run into, no matter what you do, unless you buy over 40 acres in New York State, but it's probably the same most countrywide, is literally, you need to go to the township and see what the parameters of what you can and cannot do, because Daddy will start to find you. So here's the thing. What we did was we put the travel trailer, then the township called my girlfriend. My girlfriend started crying. I called the township, and we proceeded to fight. And I told them, I will move that trailer when I want to move that trailer. You will not let me know, because that is my property. So that's another rabbit hole that we'll go into at another time. But to make a long story very short, and after 4 or 5 court battles, of which we won each one, and that, again, is a great story, of me chasing a couple of the locals, off my property, chasing me out of his private business, because my thing is just like any other male. You mess with me or my family, I'm coming, and I'm coming hard. Nothing bad happened, and I get in trouble, but I let them know they wind up calling me the Jersey Hothead, which is probably a good name. But with that being said, let's get back to the cabin process. So after the trailer thing, and the township had to see things my way, and that took about a month or two. They told me you need an engineer drawing, which is good. They told me it has to be at least 1,000 square feet, so I built 1,003 square feet. And they told me you have to go get a well and septic engineer. That is by far the most expensive part of this whole process, and the reason why I would probably say don't buy raw land. With that being said, we're going to get into the whole process of where the build started. Okay, so the first thing was we had to get an engineer. I basically knew that I wanted to do something out of the ordinary. I originally wanted to stack containers, because sea containers were becoming popular at that time, but I couldn't find an engineer to stamp off that, which probably in hindsight is still the easiest way to build, if you ask me. It's just getting an engineer to sign that off, which it makes it a little bit more difficult. And engineers at that time, it would have been like $25,000. So again, we went on a search for an engineer online. Someone wasn't, too pricey. I was basically wanting to make a box. So I decided to do a pole barn, because I thought that'd be interesting, and I never did it. So that's where the adventure took me. As I'm finding an architect, I go to the town, and the best thing I can tell anyone is, listen, wherever you're building, is you got to use the locals. So I went to the local well driller. I went to the local well engineer, septic engineer, because they'll expedite the process. The township kind of knows them, and it makes it a little bit easier, because it's almost like when you're building and you're in a foreign place, it's almost like you're an enemy. So the thing is, if you hire local people, it makes it a little bit easier. I'm telling you, these people are not. It's very hard to explain, but that would be the best advice I would give. But the engineer for the well and septic, again, the most expensive part of the whole build. And again, I'll say it. That's why I don't really believe in raw land. If you could find a house in foreclosure that already has the well and the septic, I mean, just because that is the most expensive part. But again, if you're stubborn like me and you just want to abuse yourself, raw land is it. That's all I can tell you. So I found the engineer online. Basic pole barn, 24 by 24, no bells and whistles, got a loft. The reason why I wanted a loft is because I'm upstate New York. The climate gets very cold, so you want that heat to get to the second floor efficiently. So there's a little bit of a loft. Again, we'll get into that whole process and what you think about as you're building and how to keep your family warm. Anyway, so then we get the engineer drawing. Just the drawing alone, I think, was $3,000 or $4,000. Just the drawing alone. We get the stamped engineer. Now we hand everything. Oh, I do want to tell you this. When they come out and they do what's called a perk test, and this is a countrywide thing, they want to see how fast water percolates down into the ground, and that's where your leach field goes. And that's just part of the septic system that you'll find out. But it's if you're tapped into like a sewer line and you're from the city, it's a whole different world when it comes to how you get rid of your waste. I mean, it's for some people it's a common thing. For people like me, it's something I never did before. So it was like, holy cow, this is pretty intricate. But because my perk test went well, and that's the amount the water drops in a specific amount of time, it went well. So I just had a basic concept, 1,000-gallon tank, followed by 2 tubes coming out into a field of stone and stuff. So it was very simple, and I got kind of fortunate with that, because again, but that goes with the proverbial, the what you call it rolls downhill. It's just the way it is. So anyway, we get that. We get the engineer guy online, and he gives us exactly what I'm looking for. Nothing too crazy. 24 by 24, 2-story, so with a loft. The township approves it. I'm still kind of, the enemy at the township, but you have to just get past that and just say, listen, I'm building here, whether you like it or not. And, they kind of have no choice. Just remember, when you walk into a township, and this goes anywhere in the country, they work for you. And they have to follow a set of rules just like you do. And sometimes people like me need to remind them that you garner a paycheck because of me. I'm the taxpayer citizen, and that's something you need to know. Because when they start to give you an attitude about the money that you're spending and how you're spending it and in their town, sometimes you got to put your foot down. I mean, listen, it's uncomfortable for some people. Some people are very, very nice. I just happen to not be very nice when I don't have to be. And because I've been through this, and it can be trying at times. So anyway, we get through the permit process, and then, Big Daddy gives you your permits back and says, here, pay us for permits, which is great too. It's always fun. So, the whole permit process. Listen, if I could buy 40 acres at the time and afford 40 acres so I didn't have to do this, I would have loved to do it. But at the time, I couldn't afford the 40 acres. And to be honest with you, it was a great experience, an experience that I'd be able to tell my kids. And it goes along the lines of saying, hey, you want to do something? If you put your mind to do it, you could do it. Anyone could do it. With that being said, here we go again. Now I could break ground. We have to go back to the trailer real quick, because I couldn't get this trailer moved up to my property because it was the middle of the winter. So I got to be honest with you. I was a little bit old school. I went to Craigslist, but from here on out, for the rest of my life, I'll always go to Craigslist when I need someone to help. Because here's the thing with Craigslist that most people don't know, or people that don't know just because they've never done this. If you go, let's say, to what we used to call the yellow pages, which is now Google, and you Google a company that, let's just say, transports, you're going to get a guy who's going to come in and transport your trailer. He's got a big company, he's got many people, and he's going to charge you thousands of dollars. Or you could go to Craigslist and kind of roll the dice. And I'm a little bit more hands-on, so I kind of know what's going on. I'm not a big fan of machinery or moving machinery or trailers. It's just not my thing. Can I move them? Yes. Do I want to? No. You have to know what you're good at and what you're not good at. With that being said, I called this guy, on Craigslist, and he just happened to be exactly what I needed. He needed money. He needed a job. He wanted some quick, okay. He gave me a great price. I mean, it was like, I don't know, $500 or $600 to move it at 2 miles. But it was some of the roughest terrain getting up to my cabin. And it was the winter, so things were freezing. And, again, this is a whole different story that I don't even, it just takes too long. So the thing is, I call that guy back because he says that what he does is he clears properties and he's an excavator driver. So I said, okay. I call him back, and I'm calling other places for clearings. Because I will tell you, I know how to do a lot. But when I tell you, cutting down trees is very, very dangerous. So these guys who cut down trees for a living, they're worth every minute, every second, every dollar you give them. Because it's a special skill of which, chainsaws alone, they're pretty hairy. So with that being said, he came and he was just... Again, he needed money. We were out in the sticks. I paid him by the day. I brought all the materials. I rented the machines. He was great. And to this day, this is almost 6 years, 7 years, I don't even know. I'm still friends with him. He is a great dude. He makes me laugh, but he's a good old boy. And he came in and he cleared the property, and he would send me pictures, and he would tell me, dude, you got to get a bigger machine, because when you look in the pictures, these are not rocks. These are boulders. These are huge boulders. I mean, tons and tons and tons. And he made a driveway out of them because, I got him the machine that he wanted, and he did some pretty unique and cool things. And I'll forever be grateful for him because he He had a specific talent that I needed. So just the clearing alone, it probably took him 6-7 days, to dig out the footing, because now we get into the whole thing is I'm building on a mountain. It's what the locals call ledge rock, what normal people call a mountain. I mean, it's the mountain. You're hitting, like, you're digging down and you're hitting rock, stone. It's the mountain. So what I did was you got to like pin the mountain for your poles, because I'm building a pole barn now, so I don't have a regular footing system. So he makes the clearing, everything's going, somewhat well. The township still doesn't like me, and I'm all right with it because I don't really like them either. But they have to come out and they're telling me what to do, because that's another thing. If you get into a bind and you're like a little bit confused and you're not hiring professionals for everything, you're doing kind of what I did and you're trying to do as much as you can on your own. If you have a question, you can call the township and it's their obligation to give you an answer. They say, oh, I can't give you the means to the way. But honestly, when they come out and inspect, they clearly can tell you what you can't do. So you just have to poke and prod. And listen, if you get a decent human being, not even like a decent inspector, just a decent human being, everyone is more than willing to help. In my case, it was a little bit more difficult, but listen, it's like I said, I'm not a nice person, and I'm not scared to go into the township and just say, you're going to do what I say. Again, it's the process. So there we are with the process, and I'm going along. I hit the ledge rock, we pin it, and we start setting the poles. And from there, once you start building, the building process goes fast. So everything I told you, it's slow, because you got to deal with the township and scheduling, and it's not a big deal. Like a lot of people are like, oh, it's not a big deal. Like, hey, I need to get a guy to do a clearing. Call them up. Say, hey, when do you think you could do the clearing? Just think ahead a little bit. Well, I think I should get the township to give me the approved drawings back in 2 weeks. And then you just, that's things that you can do and things that you can't do. So anyway, we get all this together. And from there, we start putting up poles. Start setting poles. I have pictures. I'm going to try to get the pictures to move along with it, but we start setting the poles. We dig down, as far as we can, because we can't do the regular 3 foot down, because you're hitting a mountain. So I start pinning the mountain, and you're putting up my poles. We start the process, and then from there, it's all about just really looking and watching the engineered drawings. And if you have a problem, because the thing is, they approve drawings. So your drawings, when they come out, the building has to look like the drawings. It's really that simple. People make this all complex. It's just, listen, whatever the drawings say, you do. And if there's a change, you call the engineer and say, listen, I have to change this because of this. Because there's the thing about construction that most people in the construction world know is nothing's perfect. Things always come up. It's part of construction. So you're going to have changes. So, and if you don't have changes, God bless you, because sometimes you go through a nice, smooth construction. I've never been on one, but, listen, sometimes it's smooth. With that being said, we started the process. We get the poles up. We get the building process going. As we're getting the building process going, I'm putting the poles, I'm framing it. I realized that, listen, I can't do this septic. So again, my buddy, he's now my buddy, guy who did the clearing. His name is Chris. He comes and he starts doing the septic, and we're getting machines. And I have some video and some footage. I mean, we started hitting the mountain, and we had to get this 1,000-gallon tank in. And they were picking up a boulder and dropping it on the mountain to try to break it apart, so we didn't have to use sticks of dynamite, because it has to get underground, obviously. So it got a little hairy, especially for a city guy. But they managed to do it. We got the tank in. And this is kind of crazy, but when you do your septic, as soon as you put your septic in, because basically it's a flotation device. you have to fill it with water. So number one, you either have to call someone to bring the water in, or what I did was I have them dug a pond. I tarped in a pond, like I tarped it in because I knew it was going to be a while before we did the septic. So by the time we did the septic, I had over 1,000 gallons to put into. I just pumped the water from the pond that I built into the septic because he had told me, like, listen, once you put this in the ground, if you don't put water in it, it's gonna float away. And then once it floats away, you got to redo all the piping that you put in. So I had built a pre-made pond. I kept bringing water up there just in case because I was untreaded. I didn't know this territory. So anyway, that worked out. As I was building, I realized I didn't have the time because you have to remember at the time I lived an hour and 45 minutes away. I would leave at like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning to get up there to work all day on the weekends. And I realized I didn't have the time or the energy because I got pre-built truss systems. So it's just a 24 by 24. But I just couldn't. You need too much people because you got to pull it up. Well, I found a guy, luckily, a local guy. Charged me a great price. I mean, it was pricey, but it was a great price because I knew it's kind of hairy when you put truss systems up. So he put the truss system up, and he put the plywood on. So we got someone for that. So I put the poles, I framed the poles. Now we get to the truss system. Now work calls, and I have to leave and go out of state for work for like 6 or 7 months. So I'm kind of like, it's raw up there. So I have to literally go up there. I couldn't find a roofer. I had to roof it myself. Granted, I know how to do everything, but I don't like roofing. Roofing is just tough. It's methodical. The methodical part is you got to carry shingles on your shoulder up a 24-foot ladder. It's just no fun as you're getting older. You're trying to save your body the best you can. But anyway, I do the roof so at least it's somewhat dried in while I'm in Atlanta doing what I have to do for work. So I do that. As I'm coming back from Atlanta, I would come back for a week. And then I would go up there and try to do as much as I can. Finally, after a while, I tarped everything in the house of value. And one of the things that you really need to understand is when you are not there, you get a little nervous that people are going to come and steal. But I had trail cams set up. And what I had found as the locals were constantly going by my house, like maybe every 3 or 4 days, just constantly. Because their theory is this. They want to make sure no one's messing with my stuff, because if someone's messing with my stuff, they're next. So they kept an eye on my property, and to this day they still do, without telling me. But I see it on the trail cam all the time. They just come constantly. I don't know if they're just kind of seeing they want an update to see what I'm doing. You're allowed to keep a permit open for a long time. So anyway, I finally get back, and I'm doing it. I'm getting it. I have to reframe the pole barn inside. So I have to frame it 24 on center because I got 24-inch insulation. You go with big insulation. I think the walls were like 20 or something where it was like for 2x6 walls. So I already had the poles in there, but the insulation has to be held because it's rolled down. So anyway, I framed the inside. I'm putting the doors in. And now it gets to the point where I have to put the trusses in. I have 24-foot long spans because, there's no real walls. I only have a bathroom, a kitchen. So I'm long spanning it for the loft. And, I probably drank a little too much, and I was up there by myself, and I kept telling my girlfriend, listen, if you don't hear from me for an hour or 2 or maybe 3, just, call the police. But anyway, I was a little drunk. I got the long spans up myself. Very expensive, very hefty. I'll show pictures of those. Got the long spans in. Once the long span's in, I got the plywood in. And granted, from here on out, I'm asking my buddy Chris just to kind of come over and hang out. Maybe give me a hand. But there's times now he's on other projects with other people, and I'm like, all right, that's cool. So most of this I'm doing by myself at this point, and it's all right. I mean, there's a lot of times my girlfriend would come up, and she would just kind of, I don't know, be there for moral support. I mean, one time we were doing the plumbing. Yes, I did the plumbing by myself too. I got bit by a piece of steel grating and I'm bleeding all over the place. And she's like, "You're bleeding." I was like, "Don't worry, it'll stop bleeding." And she looked at me like I'm crazy, which I am a little bit. But anyway, we get to the building and I keep building and I'm like, wow, we start siding it. I had my friend Chris come help me side it. I just went with a basic siding. It's a cabin in the woods. Turns out it's a good thing. Very good because it's metal. So I could ground the whole building. It's almost like a Faraday cage because I did it in metal. So the cabin is somewhat like a Faraday cage. It's grounded. So we get to that part. So now I've always been interested in solar. So I kind of know I get like 4 or 5 solar panels because I'm not looking to do anything crazy. What I did run is I did 110, just regular 110, because you have to do that for the township. And then I ran all DC, so direct current. My whole house can be lit by what you would think as car lights. They're not car lights, obviously, but it's 12-volt lighting. So I have my whole cabin can be lit by 12 volts. So I literally, one breaker box is a 110, and then I have another breaker box that's just like in your car. To make it an off-grid cabin. So when you start doing solar and batteries, I mean, listen, there's a million guys that'll tell you a million different things, but I with construction, I always try to keep things simple. So I just went with like the most expensive part of a solar system is probably the most important part, which is your inverter. I mean, batteries are very important, don't get me wrong, but your inverter to make sure those batteries don't burn up is very, very important. Like, I hate to say this, but I will. You can't buy Chinese junk. Like these inverters, like Outback makes an inverter. Like if you do your study and you'll find an inverter that takes that power. Because listen, when that power is going, it gets hot. And you know, my batteries take a toll. Like I have to check my batteries every 6 months just to make sure that they're getting water. I have to put, you know, water in the batteries. And they sulfurize. Listen, that's for another time. I just kind of, you know, the basics of it. But the thing is, you have to do everything by code. So I'm still going through my inspection process. So when they came in and did 12 volt, the guy's like, yeah, this is great. Don't worry about it. Like, you know, you're grounded, everything, like, you know, 12 volt. I didn't know that you had inspectors for that. Like, I thought it was just because it was a house. But they're cool. Like, once they kind of know what you're doing, they're cool about it. So, you know, I have a septic. Now I have, you know, that worked out. I did my plumbing. I passed my plumbing test. You know, and that's all basic stuff that you can find on YouTube. And then I have a plumber friend, or I had a plumber friend, and he would help me all the time. I call him up, like, what do I do here? Like, how do I vent out here? And because I only had one toilet, one shower, and a couple sinks or whatever, I only needed one vent out. So it just kind of all tied up and then went to a 2-inch. So it's real simple, but stuff you can YouTube. Just like electric, you can YouTube electric. There are qualified guys on YouTube that are there to help. And or you could phone in a friend. Like you go to Reddit. Reddit's a great place for information as well. Like, hey, how do I wire a 220 line for my well? You will find more people that are helpful. I mean, hey, you could call me at this point. And I listen, there's more people that are helpful and giving. And listen, we all want to see people succeed. But you got to, listen, I'm going to say this and I'll say it as clear as I can. Help is not a dirty word. You got to, listen, sometimes you got to suck it up, but help is not a dirty word. So with that said, we're starting to get to the end of the build. Things are starting to slow down. I have the windows in. I have, you know, I'm starting to get the frame in. I got the insulation going. Things start to slow down. I don't have to go as fast, but, you know, in the same sense, I'm going there every weekend. My girlfriend's awesome. Everything, you know, it's hers. It's, you know, to me, it was just a fun build. But I do love it up there. I do like it better in the winter. I'm not a summer guy up there. I'm more of a beachy guy. So I don't really like it up there in the summer. And it's, you know, I'm right in the middle of hunting land. So the thing is, going up there in the fall, it gets a little dicey. But most of the locals are cool with me now, like the ones that matter. And I know, you know, whatever it is, it is. But anyway, the part of the build, you start to like, what I did was I had materials that I found on like Facebook Marketplace are real cheap. So I built the kitchen around what I bought. I have a granite countertop. It's got a crack in one spot, but I don't really care. It's a beautiful kitchen. So I was able to get it really, really cheap. So I put that in. Windows, I got really, really cheap. Buying materials like now for what you're going to do, they're like, oh, you can't build around like that. Sure, you can. You could buy a kitchen online and build your cabin around it. You take a cabinet away, you add a cabin. I'm going to show pictures of my kitchen so you could see it. The wood-burning fireplaces. I basically built the house around. I love the wood-burning fireplace. And one of the things my girlfriend wanted was where she could see the fire, so a glass front. So, but anyway, we'll get into the heating aspect on the next part. All right, so we're talking about having a roof put on. Part of the reason I did a pole barn, I'm not going to lie, is because the township, I couldn't do it. I had an engineer sign off on me and say, hey, listen, you could build whatever you want, just as long as it meets the parameters of building code. So that's what we did. The only problem with the pole barn that really, really stunk in hindsight is I had to frame out the interior walls anyway just to get the insulation. I talked about it. But, there's drawbacks to everything you do. But, the insulation is so thick. With that being said, it's just an extra step. It's another couple $100 in 2x4s. I just wanted to stop and say, too, like, if you're doing this, that at some point, don't rush through anything. Kind of enjoy what you're doing, because, honestly, it's over before you know it, and you're like, oh, I did this great thing, and you just never really stop to enjoy the build itself and the memories that are always going to be with the build. It happens a lot in the construction world. I'm an iron worker. I build, massive, massive structures. So for me, I've always taken aback by, hey, we just build this monstrosity of a building, and it's like, whew. But anyway, getting back. So now I frame the walls. When I frame the walls, now it's easy to put the pine on the walls. It just makes my life a lot easier. I do have sheetrock in a couple places in the cabin, but I mainly stuck to pine. Pine's a good material. Again, I went out and found a lot of places that, were reasonably priced, and it all worked out. So when we got to the end, there's double doors when you first walk into the cabin itself, because I have what's called the mudroom. Those double doors waited to be put up for about, I don't know, I'm going to say maybe 3-4 years, because I found them on sale at a garage. I don't even know where I found them, but they were like nothing in comparison to what they would have cost in Home Depot. With that, what we did was, as soon as we got the pine on the wall, before we got the pine on the wall, we had our last inspection for insulation. I had no plans on living here. So if you get to that part and you want to know what I did, you're going to have to kind of research me a little bit more, and we'll have to talk about it, because I had the final inspection come in on the insulation, and I had a conversation with him, because, this wasn't a second home. This was a bug-out home. And, I would go, and I still go sometimes, and I just kind of make sure everything's working. I have a propane tank for my stove, my heat. I have a wood-burning fireplace. You'll see it in the pictures. Everything's fairly simple. I didn't complicate anything. The power goes out. I got the solar panels on the roof. I could always get light and make a cup of coffee when the sun comes out, because that's another thing you have to get into with solar. I mean, they're definitely technology is definitely getting up there to where you can run a small cabin without anything else but electricity, but they're still not there yet. So the thing is, they're still not there, but they're getting close. So if you're running a small cabin, The next thing we get into is being off grid, is growing your own food, having a pond, having water by your well. I mean, when I had my well guy come in, he was no prize. I mean, he was a good price, but he took 4 or 5 months. And, I did my own septic, so I dictated the timetable. Me and Chris. It's just as long as I had the right machine there. But the well guy, he ran his timetable, and he was there with his truck for about 4 months. I mean, I think I finally said to him, I said, listen, either drill the hole or get your truck off my property, because at that point, here's the thing about the off-grid community and the community that's building is it's kind of a sickness, but we always think the end is near. Like tomorrow's like the last day. If we're not ready, it's what's going to happen. Listen, the end has always been coming, since beginning of time. So you'll always have time to finish and feel that safety, because that's the one thing with the off-grid cabin is the safety of knowing, hey, listen, I'm just a car ride away from being a little bit further way away from civilization, where no one could really bother me. I know some people in the like-minded community, and that's kind of where you want to be. But in the same sense, you only can control so much of what you're doing. My pictures will kind of illustrate a little bit more what I did, because the bottom line is I had a guy who really, really wanted to buy the cabin, and I'm like, you're not really going to want to buy it, and he never saw it before. And he said, why? I said, because it's customly built to me. I took everything into an account, and there's going to be things in your life that it's not going to suit you. And he didn't understand until he saw my cabin, and then he kind of understood. He was like, you know what, you're right. I either have to build my own or find a place with the septic and well, like you said. And so he went out and he got a property kind of down the street from me. And he waited about 4 years to finally get his build going and everything together. And he called me one day and he said, man, I should have just listened to you. I should have just bought a property with a house on it. Because the township and the codes and everything, they're out of control. So we're going to do a couple videos on the township and how I had to deal with the township. I can't bring it up enough. Townships are cruel and unusual. They're power hungry. It's they don't look at you like an American citizen. They just look at you like dollar signs. And unfortunately it's just true. It's one thing when you say it, it's another thing when you have to go through it, and you're just like, really? I got to pay for this and do this because some, code that made the manufacturer money, and you get caught in those things. But I don't want this to be a negative thing. Like you have to really have a want to go through a build like this. If you have family and friends, it's fun. Being out in the woods is for a lot of people. It's necessarily not for me. I'm not a big woodsy guy, but the bottom line is, if I have to, I'll be in the woods. And that's just the way it is. And I don't mind, being in the woods, but I hope the end doesn't come. But if it does, I'm prepared. And at this point, I'm at peace with that. So probably the last thing I want to talk about is the means to the way. Like everything I talked about has a YouTuber who will show you exactly how to do things. It's a very, very common thing. No one knows it all, and the people that do know it all, they usually mess things up to begin with. So with that being said, you just go on YouTube. You kind of figure it out yourself. Construction's not hard. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but it does take common sense. It takes a lot of patience, because in the construction world, things can't always be perfect. Things, sometimes it doesn't work out to be exactly what you wanted it to look like. And you could spend a lot of time to make it look perfect, or you could kind of understand that no one else is ever going to see that little 1/8 inch off on your molding or your piece of pine. It's only going to be you. And that's the hidden secret of construction. We don't live in a perfect world. Just as long as your systems flow, your water flows, your plumbing works, those are the most important things. Your propane hookup to your stove and your gas and whatever it may be, those are the important things. The 1/4 inch off on the molding, it's important to some people. If it's important to you, just don't focus on it. But anyway, this will be the end of this chapter. I don't really have much more because I'm just going to do stories within stories. So you guys can kind of take pictures, ask questions, do what you got to do.